How you doing today, Miss Proctor?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for accepting the invitation. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Fly on the Wall show. It's such a pleasure to be speaking with you. Just to piggyback, just to tell you a little information how I learned about you. I was on Instagram just scrolling, and I seen a post on, I believe it was the Black Millionaires Instagram. I
Mhm.
believe Mr. James Hill TV. He
Yeah.
had a wonderful interview with you, and he had a striking caption. I was just like, whoa, hold on, who is this? I was like, wow, that's crazy. You went from a ball girl to the CMO of the Atlanta Hawks. I was like, man, I want to talk to her. Hopefully, I shot my shot. Hopefully, I was like, I'm still growing my platform. Hopefully she'll give me a chance. And you responded and you did. And I was so excited, and here we are now. So I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'm so grateful.
Well, now, I mean, I'm grateful anytime I get the opportunity to share and hopefully help other people. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely, ma'am. So, Ms. Proctor, for the people that don't know who you are, can you tell the people who you are and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. Well, I am Melissa Proctor. I am currently the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena here in Atlanta.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. Well, before we even talk about that, can we talk about like I saw that that you were an artist before you even had
Yeah.
aspirations to work for the NBA. Can we talk about a little bit about that?
Sure. When I was maybe like in kindergarten, first grade, my mom took me to get some test or assessment, and they said that, I did great on the test, but that she should probably encourage my artistic abilities. Because I guess while I was waiting for them to do the test, I was drawing on everything, and they
Yes.
noticed it. And I always liked art. And so my mom really kind of cultivated that in me. And in Miami, they have what they call charter schools. So I went to Southwood Middle School for the arts, where I got to kind of focus on visual art, so drawing, painting. And then when I got to high school, there was a program called Design and Architecture Senior High School in Miami. And it's a high school where they focus on architecture, fashion design, industrial design, and really graphic design. And graphics was kind of where I found my passion. And so I did that in high school, in addition to being a ball girl on the court for the Heat. And then I ended up going to Wake Forest University on an art scholarship. And so art was always something that was in me. It's one of my paintings behind me.
That's your painting?
Yeah, I did that one a
Wow.
while back. But while I, was very much into creating art, and I done some paintings on commission and things like that. I
Yeah.
think as my career sort of evolved more on the more corporate side, I now almost look at approaching business challenges, more with an artistic way, or kind of a creative approach to it, just kind of doing things differently. But I believe I always have that skill or ability. And now I just do art with my daughter on occasion.
Wow, that's beautiful. So art is really one of your passions, you would say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have the time to dedicate to creating, but still, even
Yeah.
going to galleries and talking to local artists, really wanted to get more into collecting art. I've always had a passion and a love for art.
Absolutely. And shout out to being from Florida as well. I'm from Broward County, so I
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
represent
okay,
Florida.
to be 954 305 all day, Richmond
It's
Heights.
all love. It's all love. Absolutely. And I noticed you said that your mother noticed that you had this love for art, and she was able to kind of help you kind of nurture that. As a mother yourself, how important do you think it is to actually help your kids kind of identify what it is that they like to do and kind of nurture that that love for something and instill those values in them?
When a long time ago, I remember someone told me, as a parent, before I was a parent, your goal
Yeah,
is to really just kind of provide the guardrails, and you got to let your child be their own person. And
yeah,
so my daughter couldn't be any more different from me. While a lot of people who knew me as a child say we look a lot alike, she is
yeah.
super girly, all things pink, and I am like total tomboy. So even with her, she's very creative, and she loves to sing and draw. And so the things that she enjoys, I really try to cultivate that in her, and give her the opportunities to grow in those ways. But when you're young, I really believe, and I'm grateful that my mom did the same for me, was just exposure. Just showing me different things in different worlds. And being able to go from, my parents were from Belize and Jamaica. My dad is from Jamaica, my mom was from Belize. And
Already.
so in, the summers, I would either be with family in Jamaica, like no resort, nothing, fancy, but like living native or in Belize very much the same way. And I think just seeing the differences in lifestyle. And then when I got to Miami, it was tennis, basketball. My mom put me in synchronized swimming. I remember one time, like art, name it. She was like, she'll let me try it. I think I did gymnastics for like a day. And I told her I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't really like it.
Okay.
So she was like, all right, if you're not comfortable, you don't have to go back. But I'm grateful now, everything from playing the saxophone to the African drums, like she just let me try it all. And then ultimately by doing those things, I think you ultimately find what you like and what you don't like.
Wow, that's beautiful. Salute to your mother. Shout out to your mother. Absolutely. Strong mothers, very important. Parents in general are very important, especially for, raising up a child. I think that's very important. And so how did you kind of, fall in love with basketball? Can you talk about that story? I heard you didn't even really know what basketball was at first.
Well, like I didn't grow up playing any sports. Like my parents, they weren't American. So there was no like little league.
Americans don't play, they play like netball and stuff.
I mean, cricket or whatever. But, my mom was a nurse. My father worked at a bank. And so when I was in middle school, all of the kind of time that other kids were really pursuing that, I was doing art. And so when I was in high school, I had a cousin who loved watching the Miami Heat, play basketball. And so I started watching basketball with her, just, at home chilling. And so I remember I really kind of got into the games. And this was, Michael Jordan and, the Bulls era and Patrick Ewing and the Knicks. And so I had a passion just for watching the game, but I never really played. There was, a court by my house and, kind of, play horse or whatever, but not really anything competitive. And so when I was 15, I remember asking my mom if I could get a job. And she told me I could only get a job in whatever I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so at that point, I don't know what I want to do.
At the age of 15?
Yeah, 15. I mean, I knew I didn't want to be an artist. I enjoyed making art, but I didn't want to be a struggling artist. And I'd seen a lot of folks who were, trying to, sell their art and whichever. And I was like, no, I want to do something more. My mom wasn't the greatest with money. So I knew I needed to get a job that I can help pay bills and do stuff. And so in my mind, I told her I wanted to become the first female coach in the NBA because I would watch these games. And back then they didn't really have women, in the locker room. They didn't have women on the sidelines. There were no female referees back then. And so my mom, I don't think she knew what that even meant. She said, okay, go get a job in the NBA. And so that's what I had no choice but to do. And I'm grateful now, especially that she positioned it in that way, because it didn't give me an alternate. It wasn't like, hey, if that doesn't work out, you could go try this. It was like, nope, if you want a job in the NBA, you go get a job in the NBA. And so not knowing anybody, no hookups, didn't know anyone at the arena, knew no one on the team. I'd never even been to a professional sporting event in my life. And so I just started, do the yellow pages, making phone calls, call the switchboard and talk to an operator and try to think I got connected to someone in community relations. And then after that, they were like, hey, we don't have jobs. You may want to try the equipment manager because they have the ball boys. And so, called him and, wrote him letters, and I would draw on the envelopes just to try to stand out and, talk about, why I had great grades and I was really interested. And so, finally one day he called me back and we had a conversation, and he really tried to discourage me, by telling me it was grunge work and you fold towels and you come really early, you stay really late, and you don't get paid. And so I learned that it was a volunteer job, but you would work for tips.
Okay.
And then at the end of the day, ultimately there were no girls. So he's like, I don't even know what you would do.
Right.
And, I persisted. I kept calling and harassing him. And I think at one point he was like, yo, don't call me anymore. I'm not going to hire you. I was like, all right. So I stopped for a while, and then I kept calling him. And so one day he invited me in for a preseason game. And that was my first time ever going into the arena for a basketball game and just seeing it like what was on TV, in front of me in real life. It was huge. And I remember the feeling just of, how grand and big it was, but I didn't know how to rebound. I didn't know how to pass. I didn't know anything. And so I really learned through that experience and working with the assistant coaches and the players, and ultimately became the first ball girl on the court.
Wow. And you did all this at the age of 15?
Yeah, 15 going into 16.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no. I mean, that was it. Just, and I didn't know what I didn't know. Like, I didn't know I was the first girl.
Yeah,
None of that. It wasn't like I was trying to do that. It just
yeah. You
kind
just
of the
want,
way that it worked out. And the team owner's son was a ball boy, and they had a daughter who would sit on the sidelines and watch her brother. And so when I started, she joined on the court with me. And so together we were the first girls for the Heat specifically.
you said something very important. Like you were 15 turning 16, and at first you were told stop calling. You were going around doing these different channels. You was calling this person, calling that person, writing these letters, being very persistent, following up before you probably knew what following up was. How important is it, in just life and business for you to be persistent as well as follow up?
I think it's critical. And I wrote a book called From Ball Girl to CMO. And within it, I talk a lot about some of the lessons that I learned in exactly that. And when you're young in your career, even before you start, like in college or, internships, the one thing that I realized as I grew in my career was that a lot of people focused on what they wanted. So it was like, I want this, I want that, I want to learn what you did, I want to get a job, and it's all about them and never really about the other person. And so I talk about, how to make yourself an asset, not a liability to people. Because if I had coffee with everyone who reached out and said, hey, I just want to grab coffee and understand what you did, or, how you got to where you are. It's one of the reasons I wrote my book, mainly for my daughter, but then also just to be able to tell people what that story was.
Right.
But, by asking questions like, what keeps you up at night? What are your challenges? What are your pain points? There could be so much that you can learn about not just the person, about their role. And then it's also an opportunity that you could potentially offer something to them, whether it could simple as an introduction to someone else, or a book or an article or recommendation, anything. But to me, it's really important, obviously, in reaching out and doing that networking and following up. But when you do that, make sure there's an offering that you're giving to someone, because you never know what that may do. And a lot of times it helps people remember you. So if there is an opportunity or something that comes up, they're like, hey, I remember that, that guy that gave me that idea that time, or that sent me that recommendation. Because in that point, you don't have to do it, but by doing it, you're making such a bigger impression than you think.
Absolutely. So always lead with value and be an asset, like you said, and not just a liability.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really good. That's really good. And speaking of your book, congratulations on being an author, by the way. I know that's an amazing feat. A lot of people, want to write and then they don't do it. Can you talk a little bit about like was it an easy process for you?
No.
Like, how was that? Yeah.
Not at all. And it's interesting because I was speaking with someone earlier today, and they're like, have you always wanted to be an author? I was like, no, I wasn't a huge reader. I never really thought, like, I really want to write a book. But, as I went throughout my career, I would speak a lot of times and kind of share my journey and a lot of the things I learned. And people would be like, you should really write a book. And I heard it so often. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, whichever.
You're an amazing story.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool story, but it's really like a testimony. But I realized that my mother passed away some years before my daughter was born. And after my daughter was born, I had all these questions for her, like in different ways, like, how did you do this? Or when did you decide to do this? Or what was your experience with this like? And, for me, I thought, if anything happens to me, God forbid, I want my daughter to be able to know my story from me. Because for my mom, I was reaching out to her friends that, are still alive and just asking them different things. And I was just like, it'd be really cool to just put part of it down, not just from a professional, but also personal, in terms of the experience and some of the things that I've gone through, just to be there for her. And so I really thought of it that way initially. And I started blogging. I wrote a blog on Medium, and I said, okay, well, I'll just put it out on the internet. And then one day when she's older, hopefully, the site will still exist. The Google will still be there and she can find it. And then, I said I was going to write like a blog a month. And after the first year, I think I had like 3 or 4 blogs. And then the next year I was like, I'm gonna write some more, and I didn't. And I remember coming across a business contact that was talking about writing a book and mentioned that he had a woman here in Atlanta with a publishing company called Mind Matters Publishing, a woman named Renita Bryant, who was amazing. And so he was like, I'm gonna connect you guys. It was a year later after that we ended up sitting down together for lunch and talking. And, after meeting with her, she was like, your story's phenomenal, would love to help you. And so we partnered together to do this book. And she was like, all right, how much are you going to write? I'm like, I'm going to write a chapter every 2 weeks. Another year went by. So this was a multi-year process because I wasn't, I mean, obviously I was focused on my career, my job,
Yeah, of
taking
course,
care of
of
my
course.
daughter. And so writing the book was kind of like an extra thing. And honestly, it was the pandemic. When last year, this time hit, I was kind of like, I had some of the pieces together and she was like, all right, what are we really going to do? And my goal for last year was to finish the book. Every year I was like, I'm going to finish the book. And last year I was like, I'm going to finish this book. And so, the world kind of stopped long enough for me to sit down and really focus on it and work with her and her team remotely. And, we just kind of worked through it. And at one point, I remember we were going through the editing process and changing, chapter titles and whatever. And we got to this part and she was like, well, you're done. And I was like, what? Done? What does that even mean? I don't know what done means. I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
And so she was like, I don't want to offend you, but have you thought about marketing the book? Because you're a CMO. And I was like, I had not given a single thought about marketing it because my goal was
just
to
worried
write
about
it.
completing it.
Yeah, my goal was writing it for my daughter. So once that was done, I was like, cool. I had no concept of what it took. And we had to talk about pricing strategies and, PR and all these things that I do work-wise, but never really considered it for myself and for this book. And so, around September of last year, we launched it, it went out. And, for me, people are like, oh, how many copies have you sold? I'm like, I have no idea because that's not the goal. But, for anyone who does read it, if it's helpful to anybody, to me, that's a blessing.
Wow. And so where can people find that book, when they want to get it?
Oh, it's on Amazon. And I have a website, melissaproctor.com, which features some of my artwork. People can see some of my old school art and some new stuff on there too, as well as different links for the book. It's on Barnes and Noble and a couple other sites as well. But yeah, it's on Amazon or, on Instagram. You can follow me at Melissa M. Proctor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for, explaining all of that. And I just want to say, Matt, it's so interesting, right? Because a lot of people, everything that's going on with the pandemic and everything, a lot of people, it goes two ways. Some people said it was the worst thing ever. Some people said it was one of the best thing ever. It all depends on your mindset and your perspective. But, I think that, the pandemic was actually kind of a good thing because it gave people the ability and the freedom and time to slow things down, right? Yeah. We're able to spend time with our family. We're able to complete things that we always wanted to complete. Like you're able to finally complete your book. And I actually published my book during the pandemic as well. Something I put off for like 2 years, but I finally had time to slow down and actually focused on what mattered for me, right? And so how important is it to actually, be present and take time for yourself?
It's interesting because I think the pandemic was a blessing in some ways. It was incredibly difficult, in a lot of others. It's just, losing loved ones. I've been homeschooling a first grader while also working for a year and still homeschooling right now. And so that was a lot. And I always say, for me, when people talk about, work-life balance, and I'm like, it's never in balance. You're trying to find harmony because sometimes work is really important. The last couple of weeks we've been focused on the All-Star game here in Atlanta. There was a lot of work to that. And, at different times requires different things. But, I'm a huge believer in trying to figure out what fills you back up, and for me, I am, West Indian to the core, and I'm a huge fan of soca and calypso and carnival. So right before the pandemic, I was in Trinidad for carnival, celebrating my birthday. And I was like, that was the one thing I really wanted to do. And traditionally, people don't take time off during the NBA season. Obviously, there are a lot of games, and maybe a year in advance, I told my boss, I said, look, February, I'm taking 10 days off. I'm going to be out the country. This was my goal. Yes. And I did it. And I had some great friends who came with me, but I was so grateful because it wasn't my actual birthday was in May, but to celebrate, I wanted to be in carnival.
Your birthday's in May?
And if I didn't do that, I would have done nothing. Yeah.
May what?
I'm like, wow. May 21st.
Oh, because my birthday is May 4th. So I was like, hold on. Okay.
On that cusp, that Gemini Taurus. But, it was important to me to do that. And I'm so grateful because then the pandemic hit and then the world shut down. So I wouldn't have done anything. But in that case, whether it's getting up every morning and reading my Bible app and my devotional or getting on a Peloton and working out, finding that balance and doing the things that are important to me is crucial. Because if I'm not good for me, I can't be good for anybody else.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're not good, you can't be good for anybody else, including the NBA. So,
Yeah.
but speaking about the NBA and everything like that, you are the CMO, right? And for me, I've heard of CEO, I might have heard of CFO, COO, all these different C's and all that stuff, but we may not know, I can speak for myself. Some of us may not know, what that actually entails. Can you talk a little bit about like what, your responsibilities are?
Absolutely. And so the one thing I'll say is CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, it's different in every organization. And
Okay.
even across the NBA, different teams may have a chief marketing officer who play very different roles.
Yes.
And so, ultimately the role for me is around driving demand and growing the brand of the Atlanta Hawks. That's ultimately it at the core. But, in terms of the day-to-day responsibilities, the different teams or departments that report to me. One is our advertising and promotions team. So everything that you see out in market that promotes the Hawks, billboards, commercials, all the rest of it, all of our digital social media efforts across all the channels. In addition to, our mobile app, if you're coming to a game and getting on the app to get your ticket, all of
Yes.
that falls within that world. Brand communications, which I partner with our head of PR on, but it's kind of like corporate communications, everything outside of the team in basketball, which is a lot, for us.
Yes.
In addition to that, we have our basketball programs, youth basketball initiatives. So in the past, we do a lot of basketball camps and clinics around the city of Atlanta, which you may see. That work kind of falls within our team. In addition to corporate social responsibility. So we've been doing a lot of work with Gooder recently on food insecurity around Atlanta, and also designing courts all around the city. We've been for the past few years. A lot of that CSR work falls within our team. Brand merchandising. So every bit of Hawks swag, merch, our MLK and uniforms, all of that work, sitting down and working with Nike, myself and two members of my team, we do that every year to come up with the new concepts for our uniforms. We have Hawk Studios, which is our internal creative agency with all of our video content and graphic design work that we do across not just the Atlanta Hawks, also the College Park Skyhawks, which is our G League team based out of College Park, as well as our Hawks Talent Gaming Club. So we have an NBA 2K league as well. And all of that work comes out of our Hawk Studios team, which is phenomenal. And then it's the game itself. So game presentation, and we call it live event and production work. So all of the engineering and everything that happens for our center hung and all of our graphics in the building, the TV screens that you see everywhere, all of our entertainment. So between Harry the Hawk and our dance team and our PA or Big Tigger, our DJ, Shamia, our host, all of that work falls within our entertainment groups, as well as a fan experience team that's out in the community that's doing things, in the pre-COVID, if we were at a festival or a parade, all of that work falls within that as well. And so it's a pretty robust organization, and all of it kind of falls within the scope of marketing. But at the end of the day, it's all around being aligned and really doing the work to help propel our brand forward and do the work in our community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. It's a lot of responsibility. And, I'm a marketing and social media guy myself. And, I have to really, shout out you and your team because y'all social media presence is very entertaining. You guys really, it's like, I feel like you guys speak to a certain I feel like you guys really target young people. Like you guys are really doing good. Like, what's the purpose behind that?
For us, it's all around next generation Atlantans. When I first got here, we needed to define our target audience. And it wasn't just what we do on social, it's the merchandise that we created. When we were doing concerts or different influencers that we work with, when we did our schedule launch at the beginning of the season, we worked with 85 South and really, looking at who is next from a target audience standpoint of like, who are the people on our team looking at? And then how do we partner with them, and getting in younger demographics as well. When the pandemic hit and a lot of kids were, remote and not going to school, we created a platform called Hawks at Home that allowed us to get our basketball programs team and youth basketball team out there making content so that parents could, log in and have their kids do a live session or hear an interview with one of our players. And so we really try to make sure that we're really hitting the younger demographic, not just in social media, whether it's on TikTok or now on Clubhouse. We're doing some fun stuff there as well. Just trying to always think of what's next because we really want to be focused on the next generation of Atlantans.
Absolutely. The children are the future. Absolutely. You guys are doing an amazing job, man. I know earlier in the conversation, you were talking about, it being crazy with, All-Star Weekend being here in Atlanta. How was that experience for you?
I think traditionally a lot of teams may have like 3, 4, 5 years worth of planning before an All-Star game hits. And for us, that wasn't the case at all. We probably had like 4 weeks. And so a lot of it is partnering with the NBA. So while it's not our decisions in terms of what happens, they really did lean on us as an organization for, whether it's our relationship with Gooder, where they went out and they did, 16 different sites and did pop-up grocery stores to impact the community on the Saturday before All-Star, or working with our live production team that really were the ones that were responsible for partnering with them to let everything happen. Even our talent got to work the game, which was amazing. So having Ryan Cameron be the PA and Big Tigger and Sir Foster be the entertainment, for the game, and Shamia as the host, like that's phenomenal. And so I think a lot of our organization, especially on the retail side with all of the merchandise, everyone came together relatively quickly to help make that happen. In addition to working on our games and our regular work throughout the season. There's still a lot that goes into our games on a day-to-day basis. So it was a lot in a relatively short time, but I'm very grateful that we had the experience and the chance to do that, especially in a year like this year.
Wow, that's amazing. That's definitely amazing. And not to kind of change the subject, but earlier in the conversation, I remember you were talking about your mother, and because, let me give you a little background. Like this month on my show, the Fly on the Wall show, we're talking about financial literacy and the importance of it. I remember earlier on, you were talking about, that wasn't something that was really talked about in your home. Right now, being, who you are now and a mother, how important is financial literacy in the home for you?
Oh, it's crucial. I mean, and not just because of, my past experiences, but even what we're doing with the Hawks now. We do a lot of things in partnership with Chase. And Chase is very much around financial literacy and youth. And so for me, it's weird because my mom was very much the spender and my father was very much the saver. And, because of it, I would hear him, I would hear her, I would see her. And when I got older and my mother went out on disability, my parents got divorced when I was about 12. And so I was a caregiver for my mom. And so while in college, I had to send scholarship money home to help pay her bills. And so I have been a caretaker since then, really going to college up until now. And so I've always assumed this next level of responsibility to ensure that I had what I needed to take care of my family. And now that's transferred to my father, who's 81. And, I still help him somewhat. But for my daughter, I never knew about investing. I never knew about how to make your money work for you or having an investment property. Like my parents lived in the house. We lived in the same house pretty much my whole life till I left for college. And so, now my mentality is so different. And so I'm trying to teach my daughter about investing, about entrepreneurship, about starting a business. She saw me write a book, and when the books came, she helped me open the box. And, so a lot of that, it's not just about talking, it's also showing,
yes.
And also trying to do my best to help set her up. I remember when I first learned what a trust was. I'm like, we weren't talking about trust, when I was younger, but developing a trust so that if anything ever happens to me, I know she'll be taken care of and how, versus especially in the Black community, people don't take care of or think about what happens if they're gone or all of their, their stuff, whether it's their debt or their assets and what happens with that. So to me, it's really important. And, I'm still learning on a regular basis. I don't think everybody knows everything, but once you get to one level, there's always another level to learn about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that amazing answer. I definitely agree. And, one of the questions that I like to ask all my guests that do come on this show is their definition of success. Now, we all know success changes. The definition at least changes over time, depending, our different experiences, where you are in life. It doesn't have to be monetary. It could be physical. It could be spiritually. It could be mentally. In your own words, what's your definition of success?
Well, I got a couple. So I know for me, the first one is success to me is when I'm able to sell conch shells on the beach. Because that means I can do whatever I want, whenever, whatever. Because if I can go to a beach and sell conch shells, that means I really don't need anything. Like I am financially independent. I can live my best life, do whatever I want to do. And I just say that kind of, in jest, but realistically, I have really redefined what success has meant for me over the years. And now, and I write about it in my book, I really called it the power of guiding principles. And it was kind of like defining what my filter or my non-negotiables were in my life. And so as long as things match up to my guiding principles, then I'm happy. And that ultimately is it. To me, success is just happiness. So, my first one is I like being creative and strategic. So whatever job or role that is, or even if it's, like I need to be able to move the way I need to move, but creatively think, and then be able to think big picture to solve problems. That's important to me.
Absolutely.
Second is I get bored really easily. And so as long as I'm able to continue to learn and grow and add new tools to my personal toolbox, that's important. So even in relationships, like I'd rather be around people that I can learn and grow from, because that feeds me. The third one is, financial independence, and very much, I don't need to drive Bentleys and, have $1 billion in the bank, but ultimately I want to be able to pay my bills on time or ahead. And then as I've gotten older, invest in the future for my daughter. I want some sense of generational wealth. That's important to me. The fourth is, work-life harmony. We talked a little bit about that. If I need to leave at 4:00 for swim class, I can go do that. If I need to go away 10 days to go to carnival, I can do that. But having the flexibility to know that life always comes before work is important. And then my final one is authenticity. I am me. The way I'm talking to you is how I talk to my boss, how I talk to my daughter, how I talk to my family. And so if I can't be 100% me, and, if it's employment, if I can't have my locks and my nose ring and be able to do these things, then that's not the right place for me. And so those are my top 5. And I really gauge my success on whether these things are aligned. Because if all those things are happening, I'm in a great place.
Absolutely. Those are beautiful answers and beautiful non-negotiables, man. As people, we definitely have to have those, various non-negotiables, those things that we want for our lives, the freedom to be happy, flexibility, like you said, workplace harmony, all those things are important. And those are some beautiful answers. Thank you so much. And, as I look at you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, a lot of times I've seen people or talked to people who they're like, I want to be a CMO too. And I'm like, why? And it was either the perception of money or power, or, thinking like, I want to help make decisions. I was like, you can make decisions in other roles. You don't have to be a CMO to make decisions. And so I realized that so often those things are misaligned by what you think it is. So I've never been driven by a title or a dollar amount. It's always been about the work. My mantra internally is like, I just want to make dope shit. That's what it's all about. I want to do good stuff. And so as long as we get to do that, to me, that's great.
Absolutely. And speaking about dope shit, I was going to say, as I look at you, all I can do is like, look, now that you said that, you created that piece behind you, all I can do is look at it. It's really stood out to me like the whole time. Like, is there like a meaning behind that piece behind you, to you?
Yeah, there is. It's funny because I really just like, geometric shapes and figures and signs. And so I made it, some years ago, but I think, between the color and kind of the symbols, for me, it's just abstract goodness.
Abstract goodness. Nice. I love that. Do you ever think that you would don't put away your MBA hat and just go back to the arts and everything like that?
I've thought about it. I've thought about it. There's a local artist who I really love. Her name is Melissa Mitchell, and she has a brand, IBL Creations, and she does a lot of really cool stuff with vibrant colors and prints. And a lot of my work was not similar at all, but, it's still just as colorful. And so I see the success that she is having as an artist and the amazing work that she's doing and how she's inspiring, especially my daughter, young Black girls who see her and her art. Like, I love that. And part of me is like, I don't know what direction I'll take, but I always think about, kind of getting back to art at some point, in some way. And I think my daughter may be the one to push me in that direction.
Yeah. I watched a few of your interviews, and one of the things that I've seen you say a few times was the fact that, you still don't know what you want to do when you grow up.
No idea.
Right. And it's like, I kind of imagine like a big kid, you still figuring out what it is that you want to do and stuff like that. How important is it to kind of just keep your options open and just go with the flow in a sense and just, work towards just the bigger picture, but, still be willing and open for new opportunities to come in?
I think it's different for everyone, and I say that I have, from the time I was in college, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I have no idea. And I really believe that God has opened up the universe and has led me in certain paths that I could have never even imagined for myself. So if I had, and I talk about, I have a friend from college who was my roommate. She wanted to be a doctor. Freshman year, she wanted to be a doctor. She was pre-med. Our senior year, we were roommates. She focused on being a doctor. Now she's a doctor, you know, and doing
Absolutely.
really well in Pittsburgh and her family. And I remember she and her family came to a game a couple years ago, and she saw me and she was like, girl, look at you. I'm like, look at you.
You a doctor.
You know, and she was like, but look at you. And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea. And like, I'm grateful to be here, but like, I didn't have that razor vision. And so, you know, for her, success came in knowing exactly what she wanted. For me, and not knowing what I wanted, but being open, but also very driven and always doing my best and taking on projects nobody else wants and being persistent, you know, through putting in work, but still being open and moving in a direction of passion. I've landed where I am. And so everyone's like, hey, so what's your, you want to be CEO? And I was like, nope, I got my guiding principles. If CEO ladders up to this, then maybe it could be a professor. It could be, you know, working in a completely different field. It can be an artist. So, you know, for me, that childlike curiosity and openness is awesome. I mean, it's really nerve-wracking and stressful sometimes if you don't know, like, what are we going to do? I don't know.
Yeah.
But just in being open and continuing to, you know, treat people well and do the work, you know, ultimately I could be anything. And I try to really instill that in my daughter. She can be anything.
Yeah. No, that's important, man. And it's like that childlike mentality, you know, having that imagination and having that thought process where whatever you want, you can have it. Can't nobody tell you no.
Yeah.
You know, that's why, you know, they say you have to humble yourself like a child, because children, you know, they get what they want. They throw the tantrum, but you don't have to throw a tantrum, but they get what they want. It's like, they don't know why they want it, but I want that, mommy. And if somehow they convince you or the world to get it for them,
Yeah.
they get it. And so sometimes that's what you have to have as a child, you know, just that child, as an adult as well, that childlike mentality, that persistence and that drive, like you said, those are some important, you know, characteristics that I'm pretty sure took you to where you are now.
Absolutely. And I also remember, I think when I was working for the Heat, like I would, you know, hang out with, you know, some of my friends that work for the team, or we would even, you know, be with the ownership and could see, you know, this is where they live. There's no reason why I can't live there in my mind. And like, even at 15, 16, and I was like, okay, there, you know, players are driving this car. There's no reason I can't drive that car. You know, they get up in the morning the same way I do. They put on their pants the same way I do. So at the end of the day, there's nothing different between us. Sometimes it's being born into a certain family or, you know, wealth, and then also opportunity, but you can work towards that. And so I think that mentality has never really left me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And, you know, I'm going to ask you like one more question. I don't want to take too much of your time. I really appreciate you. You know, on this show, you know, I like to inspire people, you know, for these, you know, general purpose, to think, to create, and to chase their dreams, right? And so if there's someone out there, maybe like someone that's 15 years old, you know, like, you know, younger, you know, before you became a ball girl and everything, and, you know, they don't know what they want to do in life, you know, maybe they're about to graduate from middle school or high school or something like that, you know, but they don't really know what success looks like around them. Maybe they're in a bad area or whatever the case may be. His home may not be the best place. What's some words of encouragement that you would give to that individual?
You know, I would always, and one of the advice that my mom gave me, actually, I was just talking to my daughter about it today. I mean, one was always do your best. So regardless of your environment, wherever you are, if you were going to be, you know, a bus driver, you be the best bus driver on the face of the earth, and whatever that means and whatever, because it will open doors. And I remember having those conversations. It doesn't matter what you want to do. When I was an intern, you know, coming out of college at TNT, like the person who was there before me wasn't there when I started. And so, you know, my mom's mentality is like, you go in there, you figure out what you're going to be famous for, and you do your best, you know. And then 6 months into the internship, they offered me a job. But I really believe that no matter where you are, whether you're playing a sport, no matter what it is, if you've given it 100 of yourself and you know that that will take you so far, because people will see that passion and that drive and that desire. And on the other side, the other thing she said all the time, which is what I was telling my daughter today, if you want anything in life, you got to ask. You got to be willing to open your mouth. You got to, like you said, you know, you shoot your shot, hit me up on IG and say, hey, would you be willing? Absolutely. If you don't ask, you'll never get. And there have been times in my life, in my career, where I wanted to go to graduate school and I'm like, man, I don't have the money. You know, I wanted to go to London. To go to London, you need the money in the bank. I didn't have that. So I was like, you know, I was going to take out a loan. And I was talking to one of my old coworkers. She said, well, why don't you ask? You know, my mom would always say it. And I'm like, you're right. My mom would always say that. And so I asked, I put a proposal together, shopped it around, gave it to people and asked. And ultimately, you know, I write about it in my book, you know, someone gave me the money wrote a big check for me to go to grad school. And if I'd never asked, I would have never received that. And it's gone through my career. Even now as a CMO, there are times where I'm like, man, I need help. And I think I got to do it on my own. And as soon as I ask, they'd be like, of course, here you go. But I just think so often people feel either it's a sense of pride or like they got to do it themselves. No person is an island and no one can do anything on their own. And so I'm a huge believer in at least opening your mouth and asking, because you never know until you ask.
You never know until you ask. Asking, you shall receive.
Absolutely.
One more question. Quick question. Did you read the book, The Four Agreements?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I thought a long time ago, very long time ago, but yeah.
Absolutely. I could tell. Okay, cool. It makes sense.
You got to be impeccable with your word and all that stuff. Like I'm huge. I love the Four Agreements.
Yeah, that's really one. Did you know they came out with the Fifth Agreement?
I did not know.
Yeah, they came out with, it's actually a really good read too. I ain't finished, but definitely check the Fifth Agreement.
I'm gonna check that out.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. But Miss Proctor or Melissa, hopefully I can call you Melissa.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, it was an honor and pleasure speaking with you tonight. I want to say thank you so much, for taking the time out to do this for me and, give me this opportunity to learn more about you as well as provide value to the world. So again, thank you so much for being another guest on the Fly on the Wall show.
Well, no, man, I appreciate you and all you're doing, and I wish you all the best and keep up the amazing work.
Thank you so much. Until next time.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you.